Good day, and thank you for joining me today for the draft budget presentation for the Village of Harrison Hot Springs. I'm very pleased to present the 2026 to 2030 financial plan to you today. It's been a collaborative effort amongst all departments here at the village, and we're very happy to share it with you today. My name is Scott Schultz. I'm the Chief Financial Officer here at the village, and we'll get started. So we'll talk about some of the presentation highlights now, just overview. First of all, we'll talk about the budget timeline, and then we'll look kind of back and see the financial results of 2025, a little overview there. Then we'll dive into the budget summary for 2026, and then from there we'll go a little bit deeper into the capital plan. Um, we'll look at some BC assessment data overall, and then finally see how that all ties into property taxes and how that'll affect the property tax bills. So looking at the budget timeline so far, we introduced the budget to council at a committee of the whole meeting on February 3rd, and it has since received first and second reading. Apologies, this slide is not showing the second reading here. And now we're basically at the open house stage where we're looking for public consultation and public feedback on the financial plan. From there, we'll be looking to get the third reading on March 2nd and ultimately seeking adoption for March 16th. Basically, having the budget adopted in a timely manner is important. It allows us to start projects and get going on the initiatives that we want to do for 2026. We've enhanced the budget engagement process this year, and hopefully that it gives the public a little bit more ability to give feedback and ask questions on the financial plan. So what we've done in 2026, we've added a new budget and tax rate information section on getintoitharrison.ca. There's lots and lots of budget and tax information there, as well as there is a budget survey that has been running from January 9th, and that'll keep going until February 25th. Also, we're at the stage where we are having a budget open house on February 24th. The public is encouraged and welcome to drop in at any time between 8:30 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. to council chambers here at the village office. Staff will be available to answer questions and provide answers to common questions, as well as listen to feedback and take feedback to council at a later date. So just looking back on the results of 2025, just a note before we start, we are still in the year-end process and the annual audit is starting late February. So the numbers in this presentation are rough. They are subject to change a little bit, but they'll give a pretty good idea on where we're sitting. Generally speaking, on revenues, the property tax, utility, and curbside revenues were about as expected. Pay parking revenue was just over budget, at 358,000. Boat launch revenue was 94,000, and that's out of a $100,000 budget, so pretty close. We continue to see strong earnings on investments through interest. The interest rates have definitely cooled this year, and it's not as strong as we've seen in previous years, but definitely quite favorable. And then we've also continued to see lots of grant revenue come in from various streams, including Far Smart grant, grants related to the Hot Springs Road drainage, Resort Municipality Initiative, and lots of various community programming grants. And these grants come from federal bodies, provincial, and other bodies. On the expense side, there wasn't any major unbudgeted repair and maintenance expenses in 2025, which is great. The December rain event that we had put lots of strain on our infrastructure, and that did result in some additional costs with repair and maintenance and capital planning when it comes to that. But we still came in under budget for our total expenses, and so we'll be in a surplus position for 2025. Continuing to look back into 2025, more on the capital side, there were many capital projects undertaken in 2025, and many were completed. The staff and council were very, very busy last year, and there's definitely a lot of good progress made. Some of the examples of capital projects that were started in 2025 was the Miami River North Bridge abutment upgrade that was completed. The boat launch building upgrades were completed. Also, the village office exterior upgrades, they were mostly completed in 2025, and then they just finished in 2026 with some new siding and a new look. Hot Springs Road drainage upgrades were started, and they'll continue into 2026. The beach walkway improvements were completed, and that's by the lagoon area, as well as the Spring Park washroom and covered shelter were completed. The lift station one, this was one of the largest projects we had going, and this was one of the replacement of the village's largest lift station, which is over by the resort hotel. That was completed, and it's working very, very well. There's also a new emergency generator that was installed at the water inlet on the lakeside. That's completed. And the SCADA system installation phase 2 was completed. And a SCADA system is basically a electronic control and monitoring system that are at the water treatment plant and wastewater treatment plant. And that allows remote monitoring of all sorts of different aspects of the plant and remote control of the plant operations. So that's basically allows our operators to keep the plant running as efficient as possible, even when they're not here. Then multiple master plans were started and most were completed, including the village lands, parks and trails master plans, the water and wastewater treatment plant, and wastewater treatment plant, and stormwater master plans mostly were complete. There were a couple that carried over into 2026, and those will be coming to council and at a public meeting for the public to see very shortly. Now, looking ahead to the 2026 budget goals, the staff's goal this year when putting together the budget was to manage overall costs while increasing infrastructure reserve contributions in water and wastewater utilities. And I'll touch on that a little bit later. We also, since this original budget was created, have increased contributions on the general side too, and that's for road and street improvements. So we'll talk about that in a little bit later. Um, Kind of four main aspects drove the budget process this year. The first one was transparency and public engagement, and that staff sought to increase in 2026. That was the addition of a survey, addition of a full day open house, and increased option or opportunities for the public to engage with staff and council and provide feedback. Staff also looked at gaining efficiencies wherever possible, and that came in the aspect of cutting costs or gaining other efficiencies. Maximizing external funding grants are a key source of funding of the village, and large projects would not be normally possible without grant funding or debt borrowing. So staff is always looking for external funding opportunities. And then one of the biggest focuses this year was planning for a sustainable future. And this basically comes down to an asset management plan, which staff have been creating, updating for quite some time. And basically that leads into reserve planning that'll look into the future. Overall, the village's debt load is very low. There is just one loan at this time, and that was for the flood pump with a balance of about 300,000. So the village is generally in very good financial position. Looking at some of the budget pressures that we've faced this year in creating the budget, we'll start with cost pressures. We're still in an inflationary environment, although it's cooled quite a bit from previous years. But we're still seeing higher prices than normal on materials and large projects, so we have to take that into account when budgeting. Also, the mandate is to maintain services provided to citizens, so budget was focused on maintaining and not cutting any services. As I talked about in the previous slide, maintaining external grant funding is extremely important. Grant funding is a key source for large projects, so our team is always looking for opportunities there. And then planning for infrastructure, again, this is one of the biggest ones. It is basically in any municipality, infrastructure is aging often at a rate faster than reserves can be reasonably built. So the focus is on increasing reserves where possible in 2026, but still keeping taxes and rates at a reasonable level. Looking at budget 2026 for some general revenue highlights, the taxation amounts coming in about 3.19 million. Business licensing budget is 33,000. The business licensing costs or prices went up a little bit this year, and that was basically to help recover costs. Utilities, so that's sewer and water, is budgeted at about 1.9 million. Pay parking, we budgeted for $370,000. Curbside collection, which is basically cost recovery um, for the contract service, comes at 169,000, and the boat launch is budgeted for about $100,000. Now diving a little bit deeper into the budget, looking at some general expense highlights on the administration side, there is a QP union collective agreement in force until December 31st, 2027. So negotiations will begin later next year on that. On the professional services side, we've budgeted 15,000 for facility appraisals, and that's basically to get updated appraisals on the major facilities at the village, which would be basically the water treatment plant, wastewater treatment plant, and then other village facilities. We want to make sure that we're covered appropriately for insurance reasons. $25,000 budgeted for the election, and $12,000 is budgeted for a creation of a geese management plan, and that was a prior council initiative. On the technology side, their information technology support services continue. We budgeted about $70,000. That includes the full gamut of software that the village uses, and obviously a very, very high focus is put on IT security, and that will continue to be in 2026. Continuing on, the fire department operating budget, there was in 2026 additional funding for turnout gear, small equipment, and fire hoses and nozzles. There's some additional training budget allowed. That's through grants, the emergency management grant and the Fire Smart grant, and $46,000 budgeted contribution to the fire department equipment reserve. So that's basically a reserve set aside for future needs for fire department equipment. And then on the fire department capital side, there is $50,000 budgeted for the structure protection unit trailer outfitting. This is a trailer that is used for structure protection and other fire related things. That's covered by a grant. And $45,000 is a grant budgeted for next generation 911 equipment. So that's coming in 2026. On the emergency services side, the emergency planning agreement with the District of Kent continues. Looking at development, the standard budget for municipal engineering of $35,000 continues in 2026. And then on the planning side, about $100,000 is budgeted for general planning, and about $20,000 is budgeted for development bylaw updates, which is grant funded. Staff had received direction from council some time ago to update development related bylaws and zoning bylaws, and that's been an ongoing project that'll continue to go into 2026. Looking into public works, council's done a great job of allowing staff to replace some aging vehicles over the last couple of years. In 2025, there was a new F-150 Lightning electric truck that was able to be purchased through the provincial climate action plan grant, so we're very grateful for that. Looking forward, there was $10,000 budgeted for some public works small equipment, which will be funded by reserve. 136,000 funded from Community Works Fund, which is a grant, and that's for Esplanade drainage improvements. $10,000 for new plants and shrubs, and $10,000 for some irrigation improvements throughout the village. Our community service department, as always, is quite busy. They always seek out grants, and they always look to maintain and improve programming for citizens here in the village. Some general highlights in 2026 will be that the Fire Smart initiatives will continue, including the creation of a evacuation plan. Also, the IDEA framework is continuing. That's a project, as well as Indigenous engagement. Wildfire resistant garbages are on the budget for this year. And for programming, there's kind of wide gamut of programming that's planned, which is includes community and accessibility programming. That includes chair yoga. There's focus on making our facilities more accessible. And again, they're always seeking out new grant opportunities to improve things here at the village. There's also continual updates of the getintoitharrison.ca page. Feel free to go on to here to see updates of projects, updates of initiatives that staff is working on, and that's always updated by us on a continual basis. Looking into some capital project highlights for 2026, this is on the general side, so we'll talk about sewer and water in just a minute. But just a general rule of thumb is how capital projects are budgeted. For example, if a project is budgeted, that's funded by grant. And if we can just look at the dike here for a minute, it's budgeted at $5.5 million for 2026. If we don't spend all of that in 2026, and we carry some of this budget forward, being that it's grant funded, we won't have the revenue, but we also won't have the expense. So it basically is a net zero impact to taxation. So that's just important to remember as we're kind of going through grant and reserve funded projects. So obviously the dike and wastewater treatment plant road access road project is continuing, and that's in the planning stages currently, and that'll continue as time goes on in 2026. The Hot Springs Road Drainage Project will also continue. That will hopefully complete in 2026. There's also $850,000 budgeted for Lillooet Ave West redevelopment, which was recently approved by council. And details of that project are on the getintoitharrison.ca page if you're interested. As well as council at the Committee of the Whole meeting on February 3rd had approved a $150,000 expenditure to road and street improvements around the village. That'll be funded by our general reserve. And so staff is currently looking at the street and roads that need the most improvement right now and seeing how we can maximize that budget for this year. And also the final phase of the village office upgrades in 2024, there was an interior upgrade. In 2025, the exterior was upgraded, and now in 2026, just kind of finishing off the last details. So looking at doing windows and gutters replacements and electrical upgrades, which will ultimately allow for the addition of an emergency generator to ensure that services can remain even if there's a power outage. Memorial Hall is also slated to get some electrical upgrades. This was mostly grant covered and a little bit by reserve. And basically this is also to allow for an emergency generator eventually at that site. Cedar Avenue water and sewer upgrades and repaving. This is going to be a multi-year project. So this year there's just engineering work started, and that'll move on to further years where the budget comes for actual construction. And there is some overflow parking upgrades, which is just outside of the village office here, $10,000 budgeted for that. Now going on to one of the largest and most important grant streams that the village has is Resort Municipality Initiative. This is a provincial funding program which basically supports small tourism-based communities in building infrastructure and delivering programming that will strengthen and diversify the tourism economy. So this program's been going on for many years, and the village has, received millions of dollars through this program, and it's very evident at the beachfront. A lot of the infrastructure up there has been funded by this source of funding. So basically, the village's resort development strategy governs the use of RMI funds, and this resort development strategy was just approved in 2025. So it runs from 2025 to 2027. For 2026, there'll be some continuing work on the beachfront, which is going to include beach washroom upgrade, a new kayak launch, some splash pad prep work for a new splash pad coming there, and new interpretive signage and street banners at the waterfront there. On the boat launch, there is also $36,000 budgeted for the boat launch washroom upgrade. And then tourism programming, there's budget for various events that happen in the village, including Canada Day, Lights on the Lake, Sasquatch Days, and Festival of the Arts, and some administration and some small infrastructure improvement projects. Now jumping into the wastewater, also known as sewer side for capital projects, and just a quick note that the wastewater utility is self-sustaining and it's operated on a cost recovery basis, so it doesn't have any input from property taxation. So lift station one I talked about prior was completed in 2025, so that's a large project that's came off. Lift station 5 and 6 upgrades are now in progress, and those are smaller lift stations. We've got $400,000 budgeted for that. Inflow and infiltration repairs. So this is going to be a multi-year investment, and it's basically finding sources of groundwater and rainwater that get into the sanitary sewer system. And that just happens over time. That happens from perhaps drain pipes that are piped right into the sewer system. So that's a multi-year project, and that'll help ease the strain on the wastewater treatment plant over time. And then wastewater infrastructure engineering, the wastewater master plans had identified some projects that need to be completed in the next 1 to 5 years. And so staff is going to start engineering and planning for the upgrade of those projects in 2026. And then as funding is available, where it could be reserve funding, it could be grant funding, and then staff can kind of move forward to completing these projects. Continuing on the wastewater capital side, the wastewater master plan will be planned to be complete here early 2026. And SCADA system phase 3, which is basically going to be the final phase of the SCADA system, is budgeted for 2026, as well as some improvements to the block and pump base at the wastewater treatment plant. Looking on the water side, again, the water utility is also self-sustaining. It's not reliant on property taxation. So basically, the user fees for the water cover the costs and any reserve planning that we do. Much like the wastewater side, the water master plan will be completed in early 2026, same as the SCADA system phase 3, and also some various water valve replacements around the village. And this is just life cycle replacements, more repair and maintenance. Now looking to the financial side a little bit more on reserves and balances, we've got about $9 million sitting in reserves. That's various reserves throughout the village. And DCCs, that's called development cost charges. And basically those are funds that are received from developers when developing subdivisions. Those can be used, they're quite restricted on what they can be used for. They basically have to be used for growth related projects. But the village does have $5 million approximately sitting in those. And then accumulated surplus, and that's basically from the village's incorporation. Every time the village ends a year under budget, there's a surplus, and then that basically just builds up over time. That's available for use as council sees fit, but we've got an estimated $6.5 million sitting of accumulated surplus. And again, these numbers are preliminary at this time. We're still finishing up 2025, but they'll be pretty close at the end of. So this slide shows the budgeted contributions to reserves and the budgeted usage of the reserves and the development cost charges for 2026. As I was saying earlier, Council has placed a focus on increasing reserve contributions as much as possible in 2026. So on the general reserve contributions, we're estimating about 769,000 to be contributed to the various reserves you see here. The road and sidewalk reserve at the committee of the whole meeting on February 3rd, council has directed staff to increase that contribution, and then that'll just build over the years to continually improve the roads and sidewalks through the village. Also on the utility reserve contributions, these have increased quite a bit this year, so we're really happy about that. On the water side, we're budgeting for 330,000 to be contributed to reserves, and that's 45,000 more than the prior year. As well as wastewater, we're budgeting $310,000, which is about 64,000 more than was put through contributed last year. So it's great to see those go up. Obviously, the more reserve contributions, the better, because as we talked about before, the infrastructure, as in any municipality, is aging, and we need to plan for the replacement of that infrastructure ultimately. We're working on some various projects that I talked about earlier, so there will be transfers out of the reserves, and then also some transfers out of the development cost charges, and this is mostly for master plans and other projects. Now looking at the tax assessment side of it, just to give some information on that, there is one more. Basically, the final rule is to be released from BC Assessment in the coming weeks. So these numbers are subject to change just a little bit, but they wouldn't change too much. So the total assessed values of all properties in the village is about 1.21 billion. And then the non-market change going into 2026, as you can see, is only $235,000. So what that is that's basically growth. That's new properties and new front doors, as most people say, that add to the pie that property taxes can be collected from. So the bigger this number is, the less tax burden goes on current property owners here in the village. So obviously this number, the bigger number, the better. Obviously growth is a balance, and it's not the only indicator, but that's just kind of how that fits into property taxes. Looking at the class percentage increase, there's a lot of numbers here, but in 2025 versus 2026, residential classes increased just about 3%, and this is all averages in the village. If you look at business class 6, it increased almost 12%, so that's quite a bit. And then recreational class was about 2.3% increase. And then that's versus a drop in assessed value last year in residential, and then a lower increase in businesses and a lower, or sorry about that, a higher increase in recreational classes. Now looking at the property tax components, and as everybody knows, the property tax bill has a lot of information on it, and it can be quite confusing at times. But there are basically two components to property taxes: the municipal portion, and that's the only portion that the village has control over. There's also requisitions and taxes from other bodies, which is not controllable, and this is basically funds that the village collects on behalf of other bodies, and some examples of those are the regional district, regional hospital district, the municipal finance authority, BC assessment, and then also collections for police tax and school tax. So basically the village collects these taxes on behalf of these bodies and then remits them. So only about 50% of your total tax bill stays for village use. And then this slide kind of shows where the village is ranks for property taxes throughout the province. So there's 162 total municipalities in the province. And if we look at the three different classes that the village has assessed values for, we'll see that on the residential side, the village is 32nd lowest out of 162. And then on the business side, 31st lowest. And then on the recreation side is 118th out of 162. These rankings are just one indicator of how well a municipality is doing. There are many other factors other than these base numbers that show if municipality is doing well and has good services, good property taxes. But I think this does show that council's done a great job in the recent years of keeping tax rates at an affordable level here in the village. I also wanted to talk quickly just about the property tax ratios, what they are. They're a bit complex, but they're also known as property tax multipliers. So a residential property is a baseline of 1. So that's just basic property tax rate. And then the business and recreational side are a certain number times higher than the residential base rate. So you can see over the years, the business has been hovering between 3.1, low threes, a little bit higher during COVID times, and recreational side again between 4.1 and down to its current level at 3.66. This basically is what determines how the property taxes are split amongst the three classes. And council every year debates and looks at the different options of setting the tax multipliers between the basic residential side and the business and the recreational side. So for 2026, at the committee of the whole meeting recently, council directed staff to lower the business property tax ratio to 2.84 and set the recreational property tax ratio at 3.7. And basically how that all kind of comes down to tax rates. This is all averages. So if we look at an average residential property that was assessed at $950,000 in 2025, the same property would be assessed at 977,000 in 2026. And again, there's lots of different scenarios that can play on this. But if we look at just pure averages, the increase in residential property taxation, and this is municipal taxation only, would be about $118 more in 2026 versus what it was in 2025. So that equates to about a 6% increase. On the business side, there would be about 8% increase, and then on the recreational side, about 8% increase for the exact same assessed value. And that's about all I have today. I want to thank you very much for tuning in and being engaged in the budget process here at the village. For more information, feel free to visit getintoitharrison.ca/budget-2026. There's lots and lots of information there, and also a survey which we very much encourage you to complete. It kind of looks at what we are doing at this point and where we are going into the future, and we're looking for public feedback on the priorities that staff and council should look at into the future. If you have any questions at all, feel free to contact the village office. All the contact information is on our website. You can send an email, and also we encourage you to drop in at the budget open house on February 24th. I look forward to seeing you there. And thank you again for tuning in.